I'll just make sure to edit out the awkward pauses.
I'll tell you what. Should I just drop out?
No.
Honestly.
No. It'll be fine.
3 or 4
It'll be totally fine.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I'll edit out the awkward pauses. It'll be fine.
All right. We'll do it then.
Yeah. We'll do it live. Alrighty. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this episode of Talking TWAMPs. Definitely recording this intro for the first time. We get to talk about the Supreme Court again today because guess what? A Supreme Court justice retired and they get to nominate a new one. But before we get too far into it, let us go around, starting once again with my same joke, my favorite time zone, the Far East. Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe. Apparently, William's favorite time zone is Uzbek time, where it is now 6:25 in the morning. I'm excited to be here, I guess.
Awesome. Now, I guess we're all in the same time zone now for the remaining members, but let's go Blake.
Hi, everybody. I'm Blake. I'm a government and German major, and for once on this podcast, the government focus is actually worth mentioning. I am a judicially and law-centered government major.
And now Abe.
Oh, hi. I'm Abe. People call me Babe, ironically. And I'm in DC, and I do spreadsheets for my job. Spreadsheets. That's it. Spreadsheets.
Lots of spreadsheets.
Just spreadsheets.
And I am William Moore, your host for today, government and economics major, and unfortunately woefully unprepared for this topic, but that's why I'm moderating. Okay, so...
I cannot express enough. I just do spreadsheets. It's awful. I hate it.
Nothing but spreadsheets. All right, so the topic for today is the Supreme Court nomination. If you've been following the news lately, you'll know that Justice Kennedy has decided to retire.
What?
Which, yeah, whoa, crazy. And this leaves the way for President Trump to nominate and the Senate to confirm another Supreme Court justice. There was a short list of 14 people, but eventually President Trump decided on Brett Kavanaugh, or the Honorable Brett Kavanaugh, as he is already a judge, to be the nomination for the Supreme Court. So this obviously spells a lot for the court. Kavanaugh, while not particularly young, is not very old, so he's probably going to be on the court for at least 20 to 25 years, and will probably be very important in several cases that will be coming up, and many things are allegedly on the chopping block. So, gentlemen, anybody have any particularly strong opinions to start on Mr. Kavanaugh?
I mean,
anybody can.
I have virally strong opinions on Mr. Kavanaugh.
Well, lay into it.
Hit us.
Well, so first of all, Brett Kavanaugh is not like a Trump pick. You know, if I were to have defined a Trump pick, it would have been a property rights lawyer, you know, in New York who had never worked an honest day in his life. You know, like somebody who had narrowly escaped conviction for several felony FHA violations. All things considered, Brett Kavanaugh is the kind of justice we probably would have seen even if John Kasich or Ted Cruz or any other of the Republican candidates had been nominated to the court.
Or, let's be honest, Hillary Clinton.
Yes. I guess what I'm saying there is that all things considered, he's not like a radical right-wing person. That being said, in the judicial
world,
world,
your definition of radical, doesn't it?
Okay, you're right, Joe. We can always debate your European. In fact, weird tangent. I was actually just talking to a German today, and he was saying, I don't know what political leaning you are, and then he said, no, wait, never mind. Even the CDU would be Democrats in your country. So yes, if you're talking about the European standard, he is radically right wing. But when you're talking about the American judicial standard, he's very far right wing. He's about one of the most right wing sitting circuit court judges as it stands. He's a measured person. He applies the law and has never really put forward a ruling that you could attack as unjudicial. But I think the only more right wing prominent judge that I could name would have been Scalia. So he's not replacing Kennedy, vote for vote. He would almost certainly have voted much more consistently with the Republican justices than Kennedy did, historically speaking, which means the swing vote is dead. The Senate is putting up this big fight about, or at least
John Roberts is the swing vote, is what it is. Yeah,
right. Yeah, and I don't know if anybody's. I doubt anybody has, but if anybody's perused John Roberts' dissenting vote in Obergefell, it does not spell good things for LGBTQ rights. That John Roberts is now the swing vote. I think we're about to see a lot of businesses get the religious justification to reject a service to gay customers.
Well, they already got that.
No, okay, we can discuss that separately. They didn't. That opinion did not say that.
Oh, yeah. Because it was specific. It was specific to the mishandling of it by
Colorado legislature.
Yeah.
But now we could easily see that opinion get written by this court.
Yeah, because it was. Yeah.
And I don't want to steal the whole range of topics that we're going to be discussing, but I would be very surprised if the Senate does not confirm this man.
So, Joe, you had a surprised interjection there. I think it was in response to Abe's comment that this would be the type of justice that maybe Secretary Clinton would have potentially nominated. Do you want to expand upon that?
Are we still on about that? Because I was not serious.
Yeah, no.
Oh, you weren't serious?
No, that's that. I was also joking when I assented.
Sometimes it's hard to tell with you, Joe. I think Joe might agree with me on that regard.
I would comment. Yeah, well, to some extent. I'll comment on the likelihood of him being nominated. I think the odds are
confirmed.
Yeah, sorry, confirmed, correct. I think the odds are very good that he'll get through, but I would not put it as I would not go so far as to say I would be very surprised if he didn't. Because at the end of the day, the Republicans still have a razor-thin Senate minority, and all that's necessary for him to fail is for Susan Collins to feel a little bit iffy about her re-election's prospects, and all the red state Democrats to fall in line, and that's it because McCain's out. So while I think it's more likely than not that they'll get a couple of red state Democrats to flip, especially like Manchin, Heitkamp, and I shouldn't forget her name. I'm sorry, the senator from Missouri.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
McCaskill.
Yeah.
I think that given their vulnerability, they will probably flip on this, but I would just say, don't put it out of the realm of possibility that it'll be successfully obstructed until after the elections.
Well, very interesting, very interesting. So
if we want to debate that, I'm armed to debate that.
The past topic that was mentioned?
Yeah, well, just the idea of whether or not he'll be confirmed.
Well, why don't we debate that? Because before he can make any decisions, he does have to be confirmed. So
that's
following
true.
The logical discretion. If you do a little bit of reading on his background, when he was actually nominated, it was initially confirmed to the District of Columbia circuit. It was delayed for years on charges of partisanship, and it only took
3 to 4 years, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah, it took him a while to get up there, and it was only after a large amount of negotiations between Democratic and Republican senators that it actually went through. How ugly do we think this fight's going to be? As Joe said, the margin is pretty thin, but this is the type of person that can affect the court for years and years and years, and while he's conservative, as Blake was mentioning, he's not that too far off for a Republican pick.
I think judicial nominations are far too polarized for that to be an issue. What we said, 4 years it took for him to be confirmed at the lower level court. I don't think that's going to happen now, because even if the same issue is still on the table, it's just going to go. It's going to go party swing. The only question is Collins, the questionable Republican vote is Collins because of Roe, and I just don't think that's enough of a challenge. That's enough of an issue for her to flip her vote on it. I think judicial nominations are a party line issue nowadays, and they weren't back then, but we've quickly progressed. After the guy that Obama nominated, I forget his name for some reason.
Merrick Garland?
Yes, thank you. I knew it started with a G. After Garland.
Garland?
After Garland,
sorry.
After Garland, I just don't think there's ever going to be a nomination process that is as civil and unpartisanly biased as they used to be.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say ever, but certainly, in the next generation or even two. And so I guess my points are right alongside Abe's. Joe was right in pointing out that Suzanne Collins is the iffy vote, and that the Republicans only need to lose one to lose this vote. But he was also correct in pointing out that the Democrats need to retain 3. And those 3... so basically the only way that this dude, that Kavanaugh does not get confirmed is if all 3 of those iffy Democratic senators know for a fact that Suzanne Collins is flipping. And I don't know, Maine just switched to, I don't know if you all noticed this, Maine just switched to a preferential voting system, which may mean that Collins actually loses her seat. Just because a lot of the Republicans in Maine aren't radical Republicans, so they may put her as a second. They may put her as a second choice, ranked choice voting. That's what I meant. So it's possible she's wary about how stable her seat is, but it's not her election year. Voters forget pretty quickly about this sort of stuff because it's important now, but not a lot of people like to pay attention to the Supreme Court. Which in some ways is a good thing. But ultimately speaking, Suzanne Collins drew a line. She said, I don't want any justice who has publicly said that they want to get rid of Roe v. Wade. That's a pretty ineffectual line. There are very, very, very few people in the judicial world who have ever said, I want to get rid of Roe v. Wade. Precisely because of this potentiality, not necessarily the Supreme Court, but getting nominated to any federal position, you're going to get asked, how do you stand on currently standing judicial stuff? And the ubiquitous answer is, I respect precedent, and I will rule in favor of the Constitution above all else. Done. There's literally nothing else you have to say. And my supposition is that Suzanne Collins will that answer will suffice for her. And Kavanaugh's no idiot. He'll give that answer. And that's it. That's all they need. And I would not be surprised in the slightest if this is either a 54-46 or a 51-49 vote. That all but automatically puts Kavanaugh on the bench, which would be a great demonstration of how partisan the Senate has gotten, but not a real great demonstration of just about anything else.
On the topic of Collins' re-election, which I guess is not now, but in the future, so can you clarify, because I want to make sure I make this point correctly, is if she were to vote against Kavanaugh. If we were to vote against Kavanaugh, would that help or hurt our chances?
Probably hurt.
Okay.
Most of the Republican Party at this point, disgustingly enough, is actually behind the president.
Yeah. My only thing is Maine isn't that radical. And I mean,
if their governor's a good descriptor, they are, okay. But you're right. In general, they're not.
But Didn't the governor get in with like 30% of the vote?
That's what I'm saying.
Race?
That's what I'm sort of saying.
So,
that generally speaking, most of the Maine Republicans are not that radical.
Yeah, and
probably about half of them that are that radical.
Their other candidate is a fairly moderate independent. Do they care? Are they anti-Roe enough for that to be the decider on? Even if her election were tomorrow, are they anti-Roe enough for her voting against Kavanaugh to be the thing that kicks her out of office.
Right, but that's my whole point. It won't even hinge on Roe.
Yeah.
Because at no point will Kavanaugh ever make a statement about Roe one way or the other. It would only be whether or not they're pro-Trump, whether or not they back the president to the extent that his selection is important enough for them. And my guess is that even if you're not, just because Kavanaugh is such a, not radical pick, again, Joe and I can hash that out later, but given that he's not said anything controversial publicly, a ton of moderate Republicans back this dude. He was on a short list from a decently moderate think tank, and ultimately speaking, I think it would be pretty bad for her unless Kavanaugh were to make a pretty radical statement about Roe, to vote against this guy. So my guess is that it hurts her more to vote against than it hurts her to vote for, and she'll ultimately vote for.
On a total aside, do you guys know what's the deal with this guy, racking up $100,000 of debt on baseball tickets, apparently? Did you read about that?
Yeah, it's nuts. Every politician seems to have some random addiction quirk. And
that's a bit much, though, don't you think?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. But also, we just learned that of the 21 flights that Tom Price took as HHS secretary, 19 of them were illegal and $3 million of government debt. So whatever.
And Scott Pruitt, anybody?
I mean, is that whatever? Is it really?
Oh, it's not whatever, but
yeah.
we're also imprisoning a whole bunch of immigrant children, and so one step at a time.
Baby steps, I guess. Alrighty. So now, since we've discussed the nomination, not the nomination, potential confirmation hearing, assuming he became the next Associate Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, how do we think he would hash out a couple of old decisions? He's been very interesting in terms of his prior cases. He's heard cases on abortion, the Affordable Care Act, First Amendment, Second Amendment, and environmental regulation, and a whole slew of other ones by virtue of being on the D.C. circuit. Do we think he's going to really change up the way that the court mechanically functions at the moment, or is he going to keep the court kind of on track as it's been over the past couple of, the last sessions of the court?
So, I definitely think it's not going to be the same. I think Blake already mentioned he is much further right in judicial speak as opposed to Kennedy.
Even further right than Gorsuch in some instances.
Yeah. And so I think that absolutely, if these cases that have been decided in the past decade or so that have been controversial get to the court, that they're going to flip. My only question is the court willing enough to hear these cases again? Is there enough argument on the court for Roe or Obergefell to come up, or are they going to let those decisions stand? I think that's a bigger question.
Blake, Joe, any counterpoints, or do you just full on agree with that assessment?
Blake, you're the legal guy.
Apparently Blake's dead, so rest in peace.
Okay. Well, I think
was I muted?
I'll stand in for Blake then if he's dropped out.
Blake's back.
I think.
Okay. Sorry about that. I think I accidentally got muted. But no, I think Abe's right. In large part, I don't think that we're really going to see those decisions come back. I don't think we're going to see Obergefell re-ruled on. I don't think we're going to get to see Roe re-ruled on.
Roe 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Exactly. I don't think we're going to see those a second time. What we will see, though, is every single one of those social rights issues narrowed to the point of ineffectuality.
Yeah.
It's going to become, at least in states that are willing to pass, anti or restrictive abortion laws, it's going to become nigh on impossible to receive an abortion. I mean, it's already practically impossible in the states of Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana, basically anything you could think of as the Bible Belt. But it is about to become basically literally impossible in all of those states.
At this point, there's nothing stopping them, because they know if it does get to the court, it's going to go in their favor. And
right. So they might as well start passing the laws now.
The court doesn't have the enforcement power. Like, they can't, they're the judicial, not the executive. They really can't enforce their decisions, which is, I mean, look at Brown and then Brown 2. They had to come up with an entirely second ruling to get rid of desegregation.
Well, it's not an enforcement issue, though.
Yeah.
It is patently a ruling issue. Kennedy would flip-flop on whether or not, this restriction was okay or that one was not. We're going to see Kavanaugh go full states' rights on this.
No. What I'm saying, though, is that currently, like, the ruling they have now, they can't really enforce, and so there's nothing stopping them from doing it because there's no government body to stop them, and even if there were, it would go in their favor. Like, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, sorry.
Yep. So what I'm more worried about, not that I'm not worried about those things, they're just a foregone conclusion. There's nothing to be done about it. And they were going that direction anyway. Kennedy's last term on the court, he actually voted Republican or right-wing the whole way through, which he'd never done before. But I think that what is worth noting are things that William also mentioned. Basically every single Obama-era environmental protection is about to die. The ACA is probably about to die. Any remaining campaign finance legislation, including the caps on donations from people to campaigns, are at serious risk. And we may even be looking at an erasure of some really like basic things that we've taken for granted. In terms of just really like complicated but essential protections in terms of privacy. I think a lot of those are about to just die because even Scalia's right wing was very pro Fourth Amendment. Kavanaugh's right wing doesn't look like it is. Kavanaugh's right wing looks like it is very pro. Again, state, pro-security, and very, very basically Patriot Act, and that's extremely worrying.
Fair enough. So, in this political spectrum, obviously, there's been some talk about on the Democratic side of attempting to really spend a lot of time not confirming Kavanaugh. And we can have a discussion on, I think, how this relates back to before the 2016 election, the Senate's decision to not even consider any Supreme Court picks by President Obama. Is this going to have a similar long-term consequence, or is it just more of the same with regards to how similar it is to the non-approval of Merrick Garland if the Democrats choose to go wholesale against it?
Even if they went wholesale, it wouldn't do anything. They don't have the seats.
There's literally only one way they can do this.
Yeah.
And that is today. Literally in the next 4 weeks, during a completely unrelated Senate vote on nothing related to this. They started filibustering, and they did not relinquish the filibuster for the next year and a half, and prayed to God that they took control of the Senate.
But even then, the nuclear option is, I would say, there's nothing stopping McConnell from going nuclear on it.
The Republicans cannot vote down the filibuster during a filibuster.
Okay, yeah, but yes, hence why it's open.
But that's what I'm literally saying. Literally the only option they have would be to filibuster constantly for the next year, stopping the legislative process for every other law for the next year.
But it's not like they're doing anything anyways. So, I mean, like...
they're actually doing a
I know.
ton.
I know.
I mean, like, I get that it was a joke, but
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. They talk a big talk. There's nothing that they can do that wouldn't simultaneously cripple the country.
Yeah.
So we think the odds there aren't so good that they would pull that kind of stunt.
I mean, not unless we wanted to, like, not pass a budget for a little while. Like I know we've done that before, but I mean like a long while.
So it would just basically, and how would that affect? Because when the Republicans pulled that stunt, it seemed to have worked out for them.
Well, so that's what I'm saying. The Republicans didn't have to pull that particular stunt. They could keep voting on things because they controlled the committee where the nomination, where the confirmation had to come out of. So they could just not vote on it. They had the majority. When you're messing around with a minority and the Supreme Court confirmation filibuster is dead, you're done. You have to literally filibuster the entire Senate, and there's no way they would cross that line.
No way they would go that far. I mean,
they would literally have to invest in the largest supply of adult diapers and sleeping bags,
and they'd have to pass that first. I mean,
because they'd have to yield constantly for a year. I mean, it would nearly be physically impossible.
So very unlikely they'd pull that stunt.
Yeah.
So any other topics we want to address with this one? Because that's what I have on it. But I think it's been an excellent conversation. If you all don't have anything else you just want to quickly address.
No, I'm ready for whatever hot take question you've got in the chamber.
Oh boy, unfortunately, I don't have a very hot take one.
William Moore, really?
I told you at the very beginning of this, I was underprepared for it.
I'm disappointed in you.
Yeah, really.
Is Joe still with us?
Maybe.
Joe, you've been pretty quiet this one. Do you have any final hot take comments that you want to make? Because you did get cut off by Blake when you were about to say something, and Blake returned.
What was I going to say?
I have no idea. You're the one who was going to say it.
I'm going to say...
I'll be sure to leave in this entire silence as well.
Good.
All right, I'll say this. I think that people who are really up in arms of this, saying, that Roe's going to be overturned, Obamacare is going to be overturned, are being too pessimistic, at least from the Democratic side, or maybe too optimistic from the right wing side. I think the evidence that we've seen is that before much else, not before all else, but before much else, Kavanaugh is, or not Kavanaugh, what's his name?
Kavanaugh?
Right, it is Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
It is a real big precedent guy. So while I agree, I think functionally I agree with Blake that I think the big result of this is not going to be major rulings which will actually overturn many of these decisions, but just restriction of them such that they'll be able to functionally restrict certain activities, certain environmental protections on the state level.
Very cool. Okay, so I do now have a final question, so I am now prepared. But before we roll into that, I want to.
I hope that pause helped.
Yeah, it did. I want to thank everybody for listening. Okay, yes, Abe, please.
Yeah, no, it's nice that Joe's back, kind of on our time
conversation.
Now. Yeah.
But I want to thank everybody for listening and remind everybody that these are editorial opinions and we don't represent the college and all that jazz. And you should also listen to our other podcasts because we are part of the podcasting network of William and Mary.
There are 2 episodes of Surviving Sodexo you should listen to.
They are still up, believe it or not. Okay, but my final question is, and this has been something that's been debated a lot, but how is this confirmation battle and potentially any battles that we might see in the next, I guess, really 4 months, going to affect the 2018 midterms? Because there seems to be a lot of consideration that it will. I don't know if that's true. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
What order?
Whatever.
Yeah, give us an order, William.
Oh, Joe, sure. Why don't you go first?
Hot take, the voters don't really care. I think that the people who are going to vote based on the Supreme Court are probably the sort who have already made up their mind who they're going to vote for. And I think, honestly, attention spans are so short these days that they will not make a significant difference to the November elections what happens now. And that's why I think a lot of these vulnerable red state Democrats will not be as likely to vote yes as one might think, because I would imagine all the people who would hold that vote against them have many, many other votes to hold against them already.
Fair enough. Abe.
Yeah, I agree with that mostly in wholesale. I think voters, like things like Roe, they're a lot of one-issue voters, and they're already going to vote for the guy, the non-Democrat in those elections. It's just too polarized for it to have enough of an effect. There's not a middle that cares enough.
Fair enough. Blake?
White hot take. Voters shouldn't care about the court, but they absolutely do.
Wow,
not that they
that is a blazing hot take.
Not that they shouldn't care in terms of like it being important. They absolutely should in the sense that it's really ridiculously important. I just really like it when they don't pay attention to it, because it should never be a partisan battle. It's ridiculous that it has become a partisan battle. And it really centers almost exclusively on this idea of overturning Roe v. Wade, because for whatever reason, and it's worked, I'm not going to disagree with the strategy. I'm just saying that for whatever reason that makes me sick, a ton of Republicans, in fact, the Republican Party itself has made basically abortion and the abolishing, the specter of abortion, the centerpiece of a lot of their campaigns, because it's the only way that they can sort of hold fast to the evangelical vote while still at the same time roaring through scandals and over expenditures and all of this other stuff. Because as long as they're voting for the candidate that will put somebody on a court that will overturn Roe v. Wade, it's fine. Their vote is justified. Joe, as a counterpoint to what you said, there's actually really good data out there, and we actually know somebody anecdotally that demonstrates this data, that the Supreme Court is a huge voting ticket item for Republicans. That some people will vote in terms of the Supreme Court. Some Republicans will vote in terms of the Supreme Court for any Republican, regardless of their stance. And that alone is actually a huge factor for Republican voters.
Well, I mean, that's kind of my point, isn't it? That the people who have decided that they want to vote based on the Supreme Court are already going to vote.
See, but that's my thing. And I think a lot of them aren't. A huge portion of the people who were clamoring against Trump in the 2016 election, in his party, voted for him just because they knew that he would do this. And if we can convince them that even this isn't worth it, that's how we get some fall-off votes. Unfortunately, what I think that means is that the Democrats need to start weaponizing the Supreme Court too, which means that it's going to be something that's okay to campaign on, which I hate. But ultimately, William, that's what I think it means for the midterms. I think that it means that among other issues that Trump has created for the 2018 campaigns to be run on, I think this is going to be one of them. I think that people are going to say, look what he did to the Supreme Court. I'm running on that. I'm running to oppose him on that. And I think that's very unfortunate because the Supreme Court should never be a ticket item.
So the Supreme Court becomes weaponized.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. Well, I think those were good responses, and I want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming onto the show today. Wow, that sounded weird. And once again, thanks everybody for listening. Peace out. Have a good day.
Bye, guys.
Bye.